The Philadelphia Flyers, they got that much-needed split, but they also look like a team with a split personality. Kenny Weiler is here. I am Adrian Fetcu. Let's get into it. Flyers, take the home ice advantage. Game 3 is tomorrow. Let's see this team finish the fight, baby. Well, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, still a long ways to go to finish the fight, but after yesterday's game, it looks like it could be possible. I didn't think the Flyers had any chance to go ahead and win any games in this series, maybe one, steal one, but they looked pretty dominant yesterday on the offensive side of the puck.
Yeah, and let's get into that right away because you lose 7-0 in Game 1, just a complete evisceration. Game 2, everybody in Philadelphia is questioning Dave Haxtell. Okay, why is Brian Elliott starting again? Why are there no lineup changes? And they go out there and they win 5-1.
Yeah, absolutely. You really have to give Dave Haxtell a lot of credit for sticking with the same lineup, knowing that Elliott could bounce back, knowing that putting TK and keeping him on the third line would add depth scoring, which was huge in yesterday's game. And I've never really been on the Fire Haxtell train. I like him as a coach, and our young players have developed really well underneath him. And I think if he continues to do what he's doing and the Flyers can get some of the lucky bounces that they've been getting, they can make this into a series.
Yeah, this is like sports psychology 101. This applies for any sport, not just hockey. When you lose one game like that, it's just one game. If you're making wholesale changes, you're showing panic, right? So you don't want to go and lose the confidence in your players. You're like, all right, we're going to make all these changes. That's not always the smart way to go. So I think what obviously happened, when you get blown out like they did in Game 1, you come out with that fire in Game 2. It's almost better off to get blown out the way that they did than, say, losing like double overtime, because those losses linger. But when you lose 7-0, you can't wait to get back on the ice.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what they did. It was 7-0, and they just forgot about it, and they came back out and they put on a show, which was awesome. The Flyers really came out, and like you said, it's definitely better to have that 7-0 loss in Game 1 rather than in Game like 3 or 4 when you're maybe split at that point already. So they got the blowout out of the way already. They ended Matt Murray's 3-game plus shutout streak, and they finally got their heads where they were at, where they knew that they had to play this way in order to make it past the Penguins in the playoffs.
Yep. And I'll say this. Elliott, a little shaky to start, aided by the goalpost on like 18 occasions, but he settled down as the game went along. Not known for being a playoff performer, but he played pretty well last night, well, if you take away the first 10 minutes of the game.
Yeah, well, I mean, he did save 34 to 35 shots. Yep. His save percentage was absolutely ridiculous. Obviously, only one goal against. And even though he's not known for playing well in the playoffs, even though he had that shaky start, he did have a couple key saves in those first 10 minutes as well. He did have that post that Patrick Hornquist rang off early in the first period of the game. But he did play really well. And if he could continue to play that well, obviously I don't expect him to stop 34 of every 35 shots that he faces the rest of the series. But if he can give the Flyers decent goaltending, they clearly have the firepower to make some noise here.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it. It was 5-1, right? But it didn't feel like it was 5-1. It seemed like Pittsburgh played pretty well for the most part. The luck that didn't go the Flyers' way in Game 1 went their way in Game 2.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to look at the first 2 goals of the game. You had Gostisbehere, who just flung it from the point and somehow just trickled through Matt Murray, and that really just kind of started the way the bounces were going for the Flyers. Then they scored, even though that was the end of the first period, on their first shot in the second period, which was also just a weird bounce off of Chris Letang into the net. In addition to that, they had the post that we were talking about earlier that Brian Elliott just lucked out of. And, I mean, that's what hockey is. Some teams will get 7 goals because the bounces and the luck is going their way. Other teams will only let up 1 goal and score 5 because the bounces are going that way, and that's just how it works sometimes.
Yeah, I think the hockey gods were trying to test Sidney Crosby and Patrick Hornquist, and they failed miserably. So Sidney Crosby's crying after the game because he pushed Claude Giroux into Chris Letang. And then you got Hornquist, who clearly wants to win an Oscar for his Academy performance diving into the boards. So if the hockey gods saw that and it was a test, then the Flyers should be able to win the series.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was shades a la 2012, where the Flyers were getting underneath the skin of the Penguins. They started doing stupid stuff like diving and not playing their game, and that's what the Flyers need to continue to do to get them off their game so the Flyers can continue to put up goals and keep the Penguins from doing what they're good at, and that's scoring. So I can't even tell you how much Patrick Hornquist pissed me off yesterday. He is number one.
Tell us, Caleb. Tell us how much he pissed you off.
He's number one on my Penguins hate list right now. So he actually moved over Crosby. What he did to Nolan Patrick in the corner was inexcusable. You don't need to punch a rookie who already had a concussion this year in the head 3 times. And he did get a penalty for it. And then as Bill Clement said, if he didn't look like he got blown up by an IED on the boards, that would have been a power play for the Penguins there. So the way he played was absolutely atrocious. And I think he won't be able to do stuff like that in Philadelphia because the crowd will definitely let him hear it. So I did not appreciate the way they played yesterday, but if the Flyers continue to make Patrick Hornquist and Sidney Crosby and the Penguins play like that, there's no way they win this series.
Yeah. Let's get into Sean Couturier because he had a huge night, goal and 2 assists, and that one breathtaking helper between the legs, back to Patrick, wide open net. Should have just given Sean Couturier the goal on that one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was phenomenal. I think if the Flyers actually make some noise in the playoffs, we'll look back on that pass, and that'll be one of the turning points because that was just absolutely phenomenal. No look between the legs pass. I believe Nolan Patrick actually had a pass like that earlier in the season, similar situation on the power play. So Nolan Patrick, and you got to give Dave Taxel a ton of credit here that he stuck with Nolan Patrick on the number 1 power play unit going into the playoffs because clearly he's making a difference there. He set the screen for the first goal, and then he scored that 4th goal as well. So that pass was absolutely breathtaking, but Nolan Patrick being in the right place at the right time is a huge bonus as well.
Yeah, and some of the young pups stepping up too. You connect, he scores first career playoff goal, Patrick as well. So nice to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ivan Provorov had 2 assists. So seeing these kids who have never had any playoff experience at all stepping up is definitely good news for the Flyers, regardless of if they win this series or not.
Yeah. The other thing that happened last night, we talked about in our preview how the Penguins, number 1 on the power play, Flyers near the bottom, but Philly killed off all 4 of the Penguins' chances on the man advantage.
Yeah, so it was like you said, split personality here, a tale of 2 teams between game 1 and game 2. Yeah. Even though the Penguins had 4 power plays in both games, they only scored once in the first game, 0 times in the second game, and the Flyers won the special teams battles in the second game. They scored 2 power play goals on 3 attempts and allowed nothing to the Penguins on their power play. So that's really good to see them being able to do that. If they continue to win the special teams battle, that's going to bode very well for them moving forward.
Yeah. I was joking about it earlier a little bit with Claude Giroux getting pushed into Chris Letang. I read a couple tweets that I don't even think the NHL is even going to look at that. So what were Penguins fans complaining about there? What was up with that?
Yeah, it's actually kind of funny because after the game, Sidney Crosby said something along the lines of, "I'm sure the league will look at that. I thought the hit was high." But what happened was Claude Giroux was trying to leave the zone. Crosby came up next to him and pushed him backwards, and Chris Letang was trying to back check, skating up the ice with his head down. And just like anybody would do, whether you're in a hockey game or in real life, if you see someone coming at you, you're going to brace yourself. So Claude Giroux braced himself, and luckily, you don't want anybody to get injured. So Letang was out for about 15 minutes, but he did come back, which was good news. You never, because he had neck surgery earlier this year, so you never want to see somebody aggravate something like that. So I'm glad he was able to come back. Hopefully, he doesn't play well the rest of the series, but I'm glad he's not injured. But right after the game, the NHL was like, no, we're not looking at that. There was nothing wrong with what he did, and ultimately it was Crosby's fault for pushing Giroux into Letang.
Yeah. All right, game 1. We'll get into this briefly. So I told you before the show, I had to work that night. I do some producing work now with the Fox Sports radio station there, 9:20 a.m. And I was going to watch it when I got home. I DVR'd it, and then fortunately, I found out what happened. So I didn't watch the game. So tell us, Caleb, what happened?
The Penguins just came out firing. There's nothing the Flyers can do when the Penguins are on a mission like that, and you don't get under their skin. They're just going to score at will, and clearly they did. Brian Elliott wasn't ready to go. He let up 5 goals on 19 shots, which was obviously something that you can't do against the Penguins. You can't let up 5 goals at all because you'll never win those games. And this game actually was the first time, second game was the first time all season that the Flyers kept the Penguins to less than 5 goals in a game. So I just didn't think the team was ready. They were probably like, well, we always have the Penguins numbers in the playoffs. We should be able to handle this. And clearly they couldn't. They just didn't play well. They didn't skate fast. They didn't get quality chances on Matt Murray, all of which changed in the second game. So I think we kind of just have to chalk that up to a fluke. I don't think the Flyers are going to win the next 3 games and sweep the Penguins from here on out. But after yesterday's game and seeing how their play affected players like Crosby, Malkin, and Hornquist, the Flyers have a pretty good shot, I think, to make some noise in this series.
There you go. And that kind of brings us to my next question. So you had the Penguins winning in 6 prior to the series. Do you still feel that way?
As of right now, I do. Clearly, you saw Game 1, all Penguins. Game 2, all Flyers. Ultimately, right here, the 2 Flyers home games, because in hockey, all you need to do is take 1 away game in a series, and the Flyers have done that, which I did not expect them to do. I think the Penguins are still the better all-around team, but if the Flyers can continue to get under their skin and have the bounces go their way, I could change my mind, but at this point, I still think it's the Penguins series to lose, even though they lost at home.
Yeah, I agree. Not that anybody wants to hear my opinion, but I feel like, again, game 2 was 5-1, but it really wasn't 5-1 if you actually watched the game. So I think the Penguins will. I'm going to say they split in Philly, and I still think they win in 6 games.
Yeah, that would probably be what's going to happen. I would assume because it's the Flyers' first playoff home game in about 2 years. I think they're going to come out firing. The crowd is going to be on fire. I think they're going to pull out Game 3, and I think the Penguins are just going to turn it on and win the next 3 after that, come back.
That's pretty much what I'm thinking too. Yep. All right. Any final thoughts before we depart?
Final thoughts is that I did not expect a performance like that from the Flyers, so it was definitely awesome to see, and definitely awesome that the young guys are really pitching in and helping the Flyers and really getting this playoff experience. So even if the Flyers do lose in 6, this is a really good experience for those young guys moving forward because it's going to help them ultimately reach that goal of winning the Stanley Cup somewhat soon.
There you go. And definitely a bright future in Philadelphia, especially considering a lot of people didn't even think the Flyers would even make the playoffs this year. So they're already a year or 2 ahead of schedule if you kind of look at it that way, if you want to look at it in that light. That's Caleb Weiler. I'm Adrian Fedke. Enjoy the game tomorrow. Flyers. Let's go, baby.
Peace.